According to popular accounts, in the year 1319, a single cone of sugar in Europe was worth a small fortune, priced alongside luxury spices, not something you sprinkled on cereal. People locked it in cabinets. They insured it. They left it to their children in wills, right next to the family silver. And here's the part that I think nobody really sits with. The thing that once made kings jealous of each other is now something we throw away half-eaten in a paper cup every single day. So what happened? How did one of the most expensive substances in medieval Europe become the cheapest thing in your kitchen? And quietly become one of the most manipulated commodities in human history? Stick around, because this isn't the sugarcane slavery done story you already know. This one gets a lot darker and a lot weirder than that. Sugarcane actually starts its journey in New Guinea, around 8000 BCE, where people just chewed the raw stalks like a treat. But the real turning point, the one most videos skip, happens in Persia around the 6th century. Persian chemists didn't think of sugar as food at all. To them, it was medicine. It shows up in ancient pharmacy texts prescribed for coughs, for weak stomachs, even for grief. Actual grief. There are Persian medical manuscripts that list sugar as a treatment for sadness, because it was believed to strengthen the heart. I think that's honestly one of the strangest facts in this whole story, that sugar's very first job on Earth was as an antidepressant, not a dessert. When Alexander the Great soldiers marched through the Indus Valley, one of his officers, a man named Nearchus, wrote home describing a reed that produces honey without bees. That single sentence, "reed honey no bees," is basically the moment sugar enters the Western imagination. And it took over 1,000 years for it to actually arrive in bulk. Fast forward to the Crusades. Soldiers coming back from the Holy Land brought stories of a sweet salt, and rich Europeans went obsessed almost overnight. By the 1200s, sugar was so valuable it was classified alongside spices like pepper and nutmeg, sold by the apothecary, weighed on the same scales as gold dust. Here's a detail I think really sells how insane the value was. In some royal households, sugar wasn't stored in the kitchen. It was stored with the jewelry under lock, guarded by the same staff who protected the family's actual treasure. But sugarcane doesn't grow in England. It doesn't grow in France. It needs heat, it needs water, it needs land that Europe simply didn't have. So European powers did the thing European powers always did when they wanted something they couldn't grow at home. They went and took land somewhere else. Portugal planted cane on Madeira. Spain planted it on the Canary Islands. And then Columbus, on his second voyage in 1493, carried sugarcane cuttings across the Atlantic to the Caribbean almost as an afterthought, a side cargo next to the horses and the soldiers. That afterthought became one of the deadliest industries in human history. Everybody knows sugar and slavery are connected. What fewer people talk about is how industrial it was centuries before the actual Industrial Revolution. A sugar plantation wasn't a farm. It was a factory that happened to be outdoors. Cane has to be crushed and boiled within about 24 to 48 hours of being cut, or it starts to rot and the sugar content collapses. That meant plantations ran processing operations around the clock in shifts, with boiling houses hot enough that historians now compare the working conditions directly to early factory labor, decades before Manchester's textile mills existed. Some economic historians actually argue that the sugar plantation, not the cotton mill, was the first true prototype of the modern factory. Shift work, division of labor, centralized processing, all built on land in Barbados and Jamaica in the 1600s. And the profits didn't just buy nice houses. I think this is the part people underestimate. Sugar money helped bankroll insurance companies, shipping empires, and banks that still exist today, just under different names, quietly, with that history mostly scrubbed from their About Us pages. By the 1700s, sugar wasn't a luxury anymore in Britain. It was a staple. The average British sugar consumption roughly quadrupled in a single century, from something people rationed by the ounce to something stirred into tea by the spoonful multiple times a day. Here's a twist almost nobody outside of Europe learns about. Sugar has a second origin story, and it's got nothing to do with cane at all. In 1747, a Prussian chemist named Andreas Marggraf discovered that beets, regular root vegetables, contained the exact same sucrose as sugarcane. At the time, nobody cared. It wasn't efficient enough to matter. Then Napoleon happened. When the British Navy blockaded French ports in the early 1800s, France got cut off from Caribbean cane sugar entirely. Napoleon, desperate, threw state funding behind beet sugar research and ordered tens of thousands of acres planted with sugar beets almost overnight. Within a few years, continental Europe had built an entirely parallel sugar industry that didn't need a single tropical colony. That's honestly the moment, I think, that sugar stops being a colonial luxury and starts becoming an industrial commodity, something any country with farmland could produce at scale without ships or slaves or empires. Beet sugar is still roughly 20% of world sugar production today, and most people have no idea it exists. Now here's the part of the story that I think should honestly be a whole documentary on its own. In 1967, the Sugar Research Foundation, an actual industry trade group, secretly paid 3 Harvard scientists the modern equivalent of about $50,000 to publish a review in the New England Journal of Medicine. The review downplayed sugar's role in heart disease and instead pointed the finger almost entirely at dietary fat. This wasn't uncovered until 2016, when a researcher at UC San Francisco went digging through old internal industry archives and found the letters. The payment was never disclosed to the journal's readers. For roughly 50 years, an entire generation of nutrition science, the low-fat diet crazes, the fat-free food aisles, all of it was shaped, at least partly, by a bill the sugar industry quietly paid. I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. It's a documented, published, footnoted historical fact, and somehow it barely made the news outside of a few science journals. One more thing before we wrap up, because I think it's such a small, human detail that it deserves its own moment. For most of history, sugar came as a solid cone, a sugar loaf that had to be hacked apart with special iron cutters called sugar nips kept right next to the fireplace tools. It was genuinely dangerous. There are period accounts of servants losing fingers to sugar loaf cutting accidents. Then in 1843, in the small Moravian town of Dacis, in what's now the Czech Republic, a Swiss-born refinery director named Jacob Christoph Rad, whose wife had reportedly cut her fingers trying to break sugar apart by hand, patented the sugar cube. A neat, pre-measured, safe little block. It seems almost too small a detail to matter. But that cube is basically the moment sugar shifts from dangerous luxury good to convenient household item. Within decades, it was on tables across Europe. Sometimes the biggest shifts in history really do come down to someone's spouse getting frustrated in the kitchen. So the next time you tear open a little paper packet at a coffee shop and stir it in without even thinking about it, I think it's worth remembering what that white powder actually cost to get onto your table. It built empires. It funded banks that still exist. It quietly bought scientific credibility. And it took roughly 10,000 years to go from a locked treasure chest to something we don't even bother finishing. That's the real history of sugar. Not just sweet. Genuinely one of the most consequential substances humans have ever fought over. If you found this as strange as I did putting it together, hit subscribe. There's a lot more history like this that never made it into the textbooks.